Let's begin the news by telling you that the Federal Executive Council has achieved several key projects in the communications, housing, and power sectors. This followed the Marathon Executive Council meeting, which lasted 2 days and saw the approval of about 21 policy initiatives. News Central's Emmanuel Bagudu tells us more.
After a 2-day deliberation, the Council approved several policies and projects meant to boost the economy and facilitate investment. The Minister of Communications says that the Council approved the procurement and installation of fiber optic cables expected to reduce the cost of internet in the country.
The approval for the setup of a special purpose vehicle, which is a public-private partnership to deploy 90,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable across Nigeria. For those who follow the development within the telecommunications space, Nigeria currently has about 8 submarine cables, which we're only using to about 10%. And this affects the quality of internet that we get across the country. So this approval means that we will now, in the next 2 to 3 years, be able to deploy 90,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable.
Also, the Ministers of Power and State for the Federal Capital took time to give their updates.
The first approval was actually for the contract for procurement of 10 numbers of 500 kV, 33 kV, 415 volts Atin transformers, and 10 numbers of 33 kV Atin reactors for the transmission company of Nigeria. The total sum of this procurement is actually about $4.8 million and 112.8 million naira. Now, the impact of these Atin transformers and reactor is actually to enhance the optimum performance of the national grid, as we have witnessed incessant collapse and disturbance on the grid.
The first approval is for the award of contract for the development of bus terminal and other transportation facilities in the Capital Territory. Secondly is approval for the award of contract for the construction of Court of Appeal, Abuja Division. And number 3 is approval for the award of contracts for the provision of security operations and maintenance of backup generator for the street lights along Presidential routes and Villa Gate 8, Federal Capital City.
The Minister of Finance also revealed the federal government's plan for the housing sector.
Low interest rates. I mean, where we are now, interest rates are elevated. Clearly, they are not the kind of rates that someone who is trying to pay a mortgage and trying to pay for the purchase of a house can afford, both in terms of the tenor of the money and the rate. We're talking about, give or take, 12%. I would say give or take 12% should be the target that we aim at, something that's affordable.
With barely 2 weeks to mark President Tinubu's 1-year anniversary in office, experts believe that these new contracts will help achieve his renewed hope agenda. In Abuja, for News Central, I am Emmanuel Bagudu.
The House of Representatives Committee on Financial Crime has described the allegations of bribery leveled against some members of the committee by senior executives of Binance as a plot to shift attention away from its case with the nation's anti-graft agency. The chairman of the committee made this known while speaking with newsmen in the nation's capital, Abuja, accusing Binance of trying to derail the investigation into its activities in Nigeria. He assured that Parliament will be transparent in its investigation of the cryptocurrency giant.
The allegation is that after the end of the meeting and when the Binance team had left the meeting room, they were approached by unknown persons who allegedly demanded for bribes. Thereafter, another unknown person allegedly contacted a local council of Binance and again solicited for bribes in cryptocurrency. These bogus, obnoxious, false and fabricated allegations are pure blackmail. clearly designed to muddy the waters and shift attention away from the heinous allegation of financial and economic crimes against the Nigerian state leveled against Binance, and which are intended to derail the investigations into activities of Binance in Nigeria.
Let's move to political matters now, where the Rivers State Commissioners for Education and Housing, Professor Chinedu Mon and Gift Wolu, have resigned from Governor Simfu Bari's cabinet, citing toxicity for their actions. Both professors, in a letter dated today, that's on Monday, 15th, 2024, addressed to the governor through the Secretary of the State, Tammy Dangogo, expressed concern about the toxic work environment hindering their ability to perform their duties. They, however, appealed to their supporters to understand their decision to resign from the governor's cabinet and accept it in good faith. This resignation comes amidst ongoing political tension in the state. Professor Mon and Wolu are known to be loyalists of former Governor Nyesom Wike, now the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory. They are now the fourth reappointed commissioner to resign in recent weeks, following the departures of former Attorney General and the former Commissioner for Finance, Isaac Kamalu. Away from that, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission on Wednesday arraigned a former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, for approving the printing of 684.5 million naira notes at the rate of 18.96 billion naira. Emefiele was arraigned before Justice Marianne Anene of the Federal Capital Territory High Court on 4 counts charge. He pleaded not guilty to the 4 counts when it was read to him. Moving for application for bail, his counsel, Mahmood Magaji, asked the court to grant him bail on self-recognition and on the same grounds and conditions of bail already granted by a sister court led by Justice Hamza Awazu. Now, Justice Anene subsequently granted him bail in the sum of 300 million naira, with 2 sureties in the like sum, who must be residents of Nigeria and owners of properties in Maitama district. After several weeks of intermissions, the Tripati Committee set up by the Nigerian government will finally meet on Wednesday. Labor unions are also standing their ground on their proposal of 615,000 naira minimum wage, while insisting on May 31st, 2024 deadline. The development comes after the failure of the government to present a nationally accepted minimum wage to Nigerians, following the expiration of the old minimum wage on April 18, 2024. President Bola Tinubu, through the Vice President Kashim Shettima, on January 30, 2024, inaugurated the 37-member tripartite committee to come up with a minimum wage arrangement. Now, still on impending industrial action, aviation unions have instructed staff of Nigeria Meteorological Agency to embark strike action on Monday. That's May 20th, 2024. The unions include the National Union of Air Transport Employee Association of Nigeria, the Association of Nigerian Aviation Professionals, and the Amalgamated Union of Public Corporations and Technical and Recreational Employees. The strike stems from management's failure to address 45 months of minimum wage arrears and consequential adjustments to the staff members. The unions, represented by 3 general secretaries, that's Ocheme Abba, Abdurazak Saidu, and Wahid Sikiru, wrote a letter addressed to NIMET's Director General, Professor Charles Anosike. They also expressed their dismay that the agency staff had been awaiting the palliative payment sanctioned by the federal government since October 2023. Meanwhile, Nigeria's federal government has tasked education regulatory agencies in the country to ensure that unregistered persons are not allowed to practice as teachers around the country. Nigeria's Minister for State for Education made this known at a stakeholders meeting in Abuja, which reviewed a proposed development project for the Kano Center of National Mass Literacy Center. The Minister of State expressed worry about the activities of unqualified teachers having contributing to the low standards of teaching in the country. Now, News Central's Edon Joseph tells us more.
The teaching profession in Nigeria had its first regulatory body in 1993 and took off operations in the year 2000. This, over the years, allowed many unqualified persons to get available jobs as teachers. While educational experts have called for stricter regulation of teaching in the country, Nigeria's Minister of State for Education threw its weight behind this call, calling on the teaching regulatory body to ensure strict compliance with standards.
All those that are graduating to be teachers in at least National Certificate of Education and above must be inducted and registered as teachers. Those who are going to graduate as librarians must also be registered and inducted. Those who are going to be computer practitioners must also get themselves inducted and pay all the necessary dues so that quackery will be a thing of the past under the Federal Ministry of Education. We must guide teaching profession jealously.
Declaring open a stakeholders meeting on the proposed development of 41 hectares of land belonging to the Kano State Center for the National Mass Literacy Program through a public-private partnership arrangement, the minister expressed government's commitment to ensure transparency throughout the project.
We are going to be guided by a lot of things in going into public-private partnership. We all know that private-public partnership involves risk sharing. We will, as much as possible, together with the regulatory agencies, to reduce the risk to both the government and the private individual that is going to participate in that aspect.
Our gathering here today is a requirement under ICRC guidelines. I therefore implore our guests to fully participate to ensure that the outcome of this stakeholders' engagement rubs off positively on the PPP and upon the quality of delivery.
With government funding in recent years not being able to match the growth of the education sector, experts are calling on governments to seek alternate sources of funding to help address the challenges in the education sector. In Abuja for News Central, I am Edon Joseph.
An explosion rocked a mosque in Garden Village in the Gezawa local government area of Kano State on Wednesday, leaving 24 individuals with various injuries. The incident occurred around 5:20 during the early morning prayers. A spokesperson for the Kano State Police Command, Abdullahi Kiyawa, said preliminary forensic analysis showed that the explosion was suspected to be caused by petrol. The injured, including 20 adult males and 4 male children, were transported to Murtala Mohammed Specialist Hospital for treatment. Kiyawa added that the scene was condoned of and the victims were rushed to the hospital where they are currently receiving medical care. We also understand that the principal suspect, identified as a 38-year-old, that Shaifu Abubakar, has been arrested. Oxfam in Nigeria called for improved citizens' participation in governance, saying this will strengthen social cohesion in communities. This was as Oxfam, in collaboration with several development partners in Adamawa State, revealed that their 11-month community peace enhancement project in the northeastern state has effectively mitigated the effect of insurgency in the region. News Central's Joshua Imarayi brings us this report.
The project is aimed at enhancing the socio-economic participation of internally displaced persons, returnees, host communities and other vulnerable groups in the northern region of the country. The project, which is funded by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, is being implemented by a coalition of partners comprised of Oxfam in Nigeria, the Christian Rural and Urban Development Association in Nigeria, and the Center for Public Education and Mobilization for Development in Nigeria.
Just like the people of Michika have extracted from it to carry out some developmental project in their area, the local government will also do the same by mining from these important documents, sections of it, and carry out activities, put them in their annual budget and execute. The state government also will do same through its various MDAs, pick areas that concerns their MDAs and impute into their budget. And by so doing, everyone will be touched by this policy.
The Deputy Country Director of Oxfam reviewed that the project has improved citizens' participation in governance and strengthened social cohesion through inclusive and participatory community development planning.
We support the government as well. You know, there is that old saying that what can you do for your country? You know, it's not always what your country can do for you. So for us, this is very laudable, and the documents that we've been able to produce, we'll submit that to the state governments to see how they can replicate that, and also see how we can engage at the federal level as well to replicate in other states.
I think we can launch into other local governments that also need, because if you look at the state over, actually all of the local governments deserve, require, and need what we are doing.
The process of integrating local partners like Krudan to be part of this process is to ensure sustainability, because we are on ground to work with these establishments to ensure that there is success, there is profitability. So for me, it's a great process which has started, and we have seen the process which has yielded great fruits. Engaging with the local communities, we don't tell them their problem, they identify their problem, and they face the problem through this process.
The Adamawa state government pledged to replicate the project in other local government areas of the state. In Abuja for News Central, I am Joshua Imarai.
Amnesty International has called on the government of Nigeria to wake up to its responsibility of ensuring the rights of citizens are protected by all means necessary, placing a finger on the root cause of the attacks which have lasted over 20 years, taking lives and property. The Human Rights Watch says that the government failed to wade into the seemingly unending crisis now. There may never be an end to it. Now, News Central's Gezawa and tells us more.
Recalling the genesis of these sad incidences in Plateau State, spanning over 2 decades, many individuals and groups, including Amnesty International, has been disturbed by the unending crisis. Examining the causes, losses, and way out of the horrible trench, the Human Rights Watchdog thinks government is not doing enough to end the carnage.
When is this thing going to end? When are we going to see the end of this violence? When are we going to witness peace in this state? We know that the government is doing its best through the security agencies, but definitely Amnesty International as an organization is of the position that the government is not doing enough.
If the promises of elected public office holders are anything to go by, then attention should be given to the vulnerable for a safer society.
Your power comes from the people. If the people are all killed, who are you going to rule? Therefore, we are please appealing to Nigerian authorities to do something to make sure that something historic happens. And this should be the last year when this kind of violence is going to happen in Plateau State.
Participants at the event were unanimous in their opinions and collectively called for a more peaceful Plateau.
We need to settle our conflicts by killing ourselves, or by making sure that we burn our properties down the line. The answer is no. So for those 2 reasons, it's very key that we have this kind of sit-downs. It's like a town hall meeting to sit down amongst ourselves and talk to ourselves and tell ourselves we must do better.
So we want an intervention in such a way that government will not come in so that they rebuild their houses for them. We expect a situation whereby government will come in, provide security for them, because they lack the security. They are willing to go back to their home because the places are not they are not safe.
With the casualty figures recorded, Amnesty International is of the view that if the recommendations presented to government are attended to, then insecurities on the plateau will be a thing of the past. Injures for News Central, Chizoba and Nyowe.
The council to 6 Cameroonian professors lecturing in the country who were arrested, deported back to Cameroon and jailed in 2018 over allegations of planning to destabilize the Cameroonian government has accused Nigeria of illegally arresting and deporting his clients. Now, while submitting a petition to the House of Representatives to help secure their release, it says that the lecturers were legal residents of Nigeria before they were illegally deported and imprisoned by Cameroonian authorities. He urged the parliament to help secure their release.
They were held in a normal arrest situation. You have probable cause that they are being suspected of having committed a crime. And before you get to that point, there has to be a procedure that you follow to get to either an arrest warrant or a search warrant that then leads to their apprehension. But when somebody arbitrarily, and when we say arbitrarily, we mean without any legal cause, is picked up and then held for as long as they were held in Nigeria before being sent to Cameroon, that is called an abduction. That is called a repatriation. And in fact, before you repatriate somebody, especially between countries, there has to be a bilateral treaty or a treaty that is observed. There's none of that in this case.
Of course, let's keep you up to speed with happenings in Ghana. We're harnessing the power of technology, sharing the African fintech narrative, and creating an environment for fintechs to thrive. Now, these are the issues of innovation and digitalization. We are, of course, at the top of the minds for speakers at the 3-day 2024 3i Africa Summit held at the Accra International Conference Center. Now, the 3-day summit from May 13th to 15th has brought together heads of state, finance minister from across the continent, governors of the central banks, and other stakeholders in the fintech industry. This year's event is on the theme Unleashing the Fintech and Digital Economy Potential in Africa. Well, joining me on the news at this time to shed more light on this and talk about it is News Central's international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Afia, what were the main aim or the main objectives of the 3i Africa Summit?
It was all about bringing together policy and technology to forward Africa's digital future. So whether that's people that are working in fintech, AI, blockchain, but as well as using fintech in the creative industries like fashion, music and sports. It was all about bringing these people together to make sure that we can forward Africa's digital future. A lot of the conversations around this week have been about inclusivity, about how Africa cannot be left behind other continents when it comes to fintech and digital economy.
Let's also look at what you think, a conference like this, or what makes a conference like this so important, particularly at this time in Africa.
That's a really good question. Look, at this point, the African continent, as we very well know, is on the up. And embracing fintech and digital economy is one way of making sure the African continent keeps on soaring. And in a lot of ways, we're actually the innovators when it comes to fintech economy. We think of mobile money, when we think of remittance payment systems, but it's all about impact, innovation, and networking, making sure that people can come together to share all the technology and the information that they have in this fintech ecosystem to make sure that all these things work together and work properly. And that's the best way that you can forward the fintech economy in Africa. So by having all these people come together at this particular summit on the African continent, it encourages networking, it encourages growing those ecosystems, and encourages these conversations. Conversations are only the beginning, though. It's great to have all these people in this room, but it's all about what's going to happen afterwards when everybody goes home. It's not just we came to Accra, we had a good time, we had 3 days of talking and networking. It's about what happens afterwards. Now, President Nana Akufo-Addo, Ghana's president, on day one of the conference, announced that there was a $200 million memorandum signed that would encourage small and medium.
All right, Afia, thank you so much for the update. We are having a bit of connection issues with you, but we appreciate your contribution on the news. The news continues in West Africa. A Gambian former Interior Minister Ousman Sonko has been arrested to sentenced to 20 years in prison by a court in Switzerland for crimes against humanity, committed when President Yahya Jammeh was in power. Now, this is according to a non-governmental organization which presented evidence of atrocities committed against the former president's political opponents at the International Court. Philip Grant, the executive director of A Trial International, the NGO that filed the complaint for Sonko's arrest, said on X that the conviction sends resounding message against impunity. Switzerland tried the case under the principle of universal jurisdiction, which allows countries to prosecute persons for crimes that took place elsewhere. Sonko is the highest-ranking government official ever to be prosecuted under this principle in Europe. In Southern Africa, in Zimipilo, an informal town close to Johannesburg, South Africa, residents are living in fear due to a high crime rate associated with gangs and illicit gold ore mining. There are records of rape, incessant killings, and gang-related crimes by illegal miners, where more than 80 persons were murdered every day. There is more in this package.
They are called Zama Zama, which directly translates to those who try in the Zulu language.
That thing I'm just doing because of that I see other guys doing. After that I see money.
These illegal miners have been ravaging Zimipilo, an informal settlement in the east of Johannesburg, often a nightmare for young women like Lutho Makeyi, who not only worries about the sudden gunshot, but also the fear of being raped.
Besicasha phansi kwemibhede uthukile itrauma yonke lento sakho nokubheka emgaqweni momela uhambe umekutatazela ubheke emuva ukuthi ayiwandi ukuthi kusasa ngizosakuphila or ngiyiyouth kwenza kuzowenzakalani abasikwazi ukulala thina izamazana uphelile umhlaba esibeke imiphuphu yethu phezulu kwawo imiphuphu iyatshona ngoba bahomba umhlaba bangaphansi bawukhuphe bawubeke ngaphandle.
Slug heaps, shafts and deep trenches are what make up the Zimipilo village, a reflection of a generation of miners from the 1880 gold rush era. With the incessant high levels of violent crime here, residents say they have lost faith in politics and would not participate in the upcoming elections.
Angeke sivote. Ngeke vote because abantu bakhona bamele sivote khona bathi vote for electricity, vote for inabasitshela ngento serious.
With the thousands of illegal miners operating in this space, scavenging, recycling and processing leftover gold ore with a high degree of crime, religious leader Anthony Sherman is advocating for the total removal of the Zimipilo village.
By the removal, the complete removal of the camp, we're going to safeguard the infrastructure that's currently running there. We're going to also eliminate immediately the running battles that are taking place. We're going to also at the same time secure the people in their mindset that everything is better than what it was.
While South Africa is home to more than 6,000 derelict and ownerless mines, according to the government, with stated plans to rehabilitate and close down the abandoned shaft, experts say corruption and poverty will make it hard for settlement like Zimipilo to become history.
We head to East Africa, where a prominent opposition politician and critic of Rwanda's President Paul Kagame has been barred by the court from vying in the July presidential poll. Bernard Tanganda had asked the court to lift his conviction so he could qualify to run in the polls. Rwanda law forbids individuals who have been convicted for more than 6 months from holding public office. On Tuesday, the High Court declined Danganda's request, citing his failure to pay legal fees in the previous case. He maintained he had paid the fees, adding that he was not surprised by the court's decision. Taganda was arrested before Rwanda's 2010 election, in which he planned to run. He was freed in 2014 after serving time on charges including organizing unauthorized demonstration and threatening state security. And in the world of business, as of April 2024, Nigeria's headline inflation rate increased to 33.69% from 33.20% recorded in March 2024. This shows that in comparison to March 2024, the headline inflation rate for April 2024 increased by 0.49 percentage points. April 2024, the headline inflation rate was 11.47% points higher year-on-year than it was in April 2023, which was 22.22%. This illustrates how the headline inflation rate increased between April 2023 and April 2024. In addition, April 2024 headline inflation rate was 2.29% in a month-over-month basis, 0.73% less than March 2024 rate of 3.02%, which suggests that the average price level in April 2024 will increase at a slower rate than it had in March 2024. To discuss this further, I'm being joined on the news by research analyst, Chapel Hill Dunham, that's Nabila Mohammed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Great. Good afternoon. Now, while inflation rose to 33.69% in April 2024, how significant is this increase compared to March 2024?
Yes, true. As you mentioned, as called out the numbers, on a year-on-year basis, inflation rose to 33.69%. That's headline inflation. We have food inflation also testing new highs at 40.53%. Year-on-year, we have core inflation at 26%, and of course, imported food inflation at 34%. What we notice is that for the second consecutive month in 2024, looking at it from a month-on-month basis, we have seen some form of disinflation happen on a month-on-month basis, and that sort of speaks to the fact that the policies that the CBN has embarked upon since the start of 2024 are largely being reflected by the month-on-month disinflation that we're seeing for the second consecutive time. I mean, looking at it from a 3.02% that was recorded month-on-month growth in March to a 2.29% for headline inflation in the month of April on a month-on-month basis. And this simply means that on a month-on-month basis, prices are indeed stabilizing or decreasing on that front. But of course, on a year-on-year basis, it's still a concern. Inflation is still high and will to still be something to be discussed when the next MPC happens next week.
Now, I mean, you said quite a number of things, but although inflation climbed in April, the text mentions a lower month-on-month increase compared to March. Now, can you explain the difference between the year-over-year and month-on-month inflation rate, particularly in this context?
So the year-on-year is really just looking at April this year versus April last year, the increase in the CPI. That is what we see as 33.69% as the year-on-year inflation, that's the headline inflation for the month of April. Just looking at April 2024 versus April 2023. Now, the month-on-month is really the change in CPI based on a month-on-month basis. That is from April 24 versus March 2024. So that is how you look at it from a month-on-month perspective, and also how you look at it from a year-on-year perspective. That's 2024, April 2024 versus April 2023. And on month-on-month, you're looking at April 2024 versus March 2024.
All right. So now let's also consider the current inflation rate and its recent trends. How might this impact the average Nigerian's consuming consumers' purchasing power, basically?
Really, as I mentioned earlier, the headline inflation, looking at it on a year-on-year basis, is still a cause for concern, and it will be something that will still be discussed when the MPC happens next week. The MPC meeting happens next week. And how is it burdening Nigerians? We still have legacy issues around food and food inflation still above 40%, and that is something that really would burden the pockets of the average Nigerian. But really what we should focus on, especially as a country, is to look at how the fiscal side of things can tackle the supply side of inflation, given that the bulk of the increase in inflation rates that we see year on year or month on month when it is increased, when it is released rather, is largely stemming from the food basket of things, and that's because we still have legacy issues around lack of infrastructure, insecurity, and other issues around the food sector that needs to be addressed. So all these things will still burden Nigerians for sure until we start to see respite from the front of the supply side of tackling inflation, because I believe the CBN has really the MPC rather has really done what they can do in terms of using all the tools available to them, which is raising interest rates and trying to stabilize prices both in the FX space and just general price levels. So they would still consider this, but then fiscal authorities have to start acting in order for the impact it would have on the average Nigerian in terms of spending would be reduced or sort of addressed at the end of the day.
All right. Now, next week, Monday and Tuesday, the Monetary Policy Committee of Nigeria Central Bank will sit. What do you expect from this particular meeting?
Well, it will not be far off from what we expect them to discuss, the rising inflation, and just examining how much of their policy has actually impacted the market on a general level. And what we expect really is still a further hike in the policy rate. Do we expect it to be aggressive? We still expect them to raise interest rate at the minimum 150 basis points, 200 is what we think that will possibly materialize in terms of interest rates increase in the MPR, and it will largely be just because of what we are still seeing the current inflation stand at. And another thing I believe they would consider seriously is the fact that for the second consecutive month, there has been a disinflation occur on a month-on-month basis. So they would also look at that, and it will, what we believe the policymakers should really do is focus on that, focus on the month-on-month disinflation that we're seeing, and examine how the policies that they have started, especially since the hikes in February and March, has played out in terms of addressing inflation, if not on a year-on-year basis, but on a month-on-month basis. So we would expect them to discuss that, and we also expect them to look at the FX market as well, and come up with other strategies in order to provide more stability in the FX rates, as we continue to see that since the past month, the Naira has depreciated, and we will definitely have them discuss that in the next MPC meeting as well.
All right. Thank you so much for your time on the news.
Thank you.
"33-year-old South African athlete Caster Semenya is appearing before the European Court of Human Rights in France. This is as the ECHR has to make a decision on whether Semenya has to lower his testosterone levels in order to compete with other female athletes. Semenya, a double Olympic champion, has previously denied to lower her testosterone level. A year ago, the court found that Sania had been discriminated against and that her privacy had been violated. Meanwhile, the double Olympic champion has retired from sports. However, she hopes that the decision by the ECHR will ensure that the rights of athletes were respected when rules are made by sports governing bodies. A legal battle on the issue of her testosterone had been ongoing since 2018. Now, joining me on the news to discuss this is the chairperson of the Commission for Gender Equality, Advocate Siabenya Sampaya Mogale. Thank you so much for your time. Now, I mean, Kasta is being made to defend what she is naturally born with. I mean, it's outside her control. What do you make of this?
Thank you for having me, sir. Yes, you are correct. Kasta is actually being made to defend who she naturally is, and is also being made to choose. Either you change who you naturally are, how you were born, or you cannot run. That's what it is.
Now, I mean, what do you make of this particular move, you know, that she's forced to do? Because we understand that a year ago the court found that Kasta had been discriminated against and that her privacy had been violated. Why is she made to face the court again?
Okay, today she was actually not facing the court, but rather defending that decision. The European Court of Justice in July 2023, as you correctly put it, actually said what had happened, what had been asked of her was a violation of her human rights, a violation of a personal dignity, and it is wrong. However, the country of Switzerland then went ahead to appeal that decision. That is why Kasta was back in court today to come and defend that decision of the European Court of Justice, European Court of Human Rights, pardon me, that decision was correct. That is why Kasta came back.
All right. Now, even after retirement, Kasta is still fighting for right. What can you say about this?
It actually is commendable because, like she has said over and over again, that this is not about her alone, nor is it about her anymore. It is about the generations that are going to come after her, where people are born with certain features and they are made to change them, or else they will not participate. You know, and this is quite hurtful because it goes against the grain of human rights generally. Since the World War I, the whole issue of people changing medical interventions to change how people look and see themselves and are in terms of their biological makeup has been something that has been outlawed and frowned upon. And here it is, 2021, since 2010, actually, you have somebody who is being forced to undergo a similar thing that during the First World War, it was said it cannot and it shouldn't be done.
I mean, before I let you go, what message do you think this sends across? I mean, there are quite a number of people in the world that are pretty different. I mean, we have people, some that are even intersex, you know, and some, you know, females will have unusual amount of hair, facial hair, you know, different makeups, and this happening. These individuals are trying to achieve their dreams, become something in life, and then laws like this come up. What does this send across, the move by Kasta in particular?
The move by Kasta is actually a positive one, to say we cannot be forced into a streamline to say a woman has got to look this way and nothing more, because then that is different. Then that becomes a problem, because which is an ideal woman? And we're going to end up going to, you know, your blonde hair and blue eyes, or how far are we going to go to actually say this is an ideal woman? But secondly, Kasta is a woman through and through, with an extra chromosome of sorts, and that has got nothing to do with her. So it is important. What she is actually doing is actually sending a message out there that we cannot be forced into a rain jacket. We've got to fight it, and we're fully behind her. And we're saying to all the young girls and women out there who do not fit into a particular description of who they should be, they need to stand up and reject that.
All right. Thank you so much for your time on the news.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on the news at this time. But before we go, another look at some of our top stories. We told you that over 20 injured as explosion rocks Kano Mosque. We also told you that Swiss court jails Gambia's former Interior Minister Ousman Sonko. Prominent Rwandan opposition candidate barred from July presidential poll. Don't forget to send in your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen. You can also follow us on social, that's News Central TV, and you can watch us live across these platforms: DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Apple TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Dakpo at Digboy. Bye for now.